Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors from the Open Seasons Property Studio. Listen, are you looking to purchase the perfect piece of hunting property, upgrade your farm equipment, or have you been dreaming of owning your slice of heaven out in the country? Look no further than Mississippi Land Bank for your financing needs. For more than 100 years, farming families and landowners in North Mississippi have turned to Mississippi Land Bank for all kinds of financial solutions. It's for land, whether it's for land or equipment or livestock. For more information, visit mslandbank.com or go by and see one of their friendly staff at any of their offices. We're pleased to have them as a sponsor, that is for sure. And listen, real quick before we leave the conversation about the K9 unit and the important fundraiser that's underway now for the foundation. Again, this foundation board doing such great work to help fill gaps for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. But if you go to the foundation, it's probably the quickest way to get there. Just put Foundation, Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks in the search bar. It will bring up the foundation website. You'll immediately see a button. Click on the button, and please consider giving whatever you can to the K9 unit. They're saving lives. They're helping with conservation efforts across the state of Mississippi. And, you know, whether it's training or equipment or veterinary care or operational costs, it's expensive to have this team. And they're staying trained, as you heard just now. So do everything you can to contribute. We would really appreciate that. You can also go to the Super Talk Outdoors Facebook page, and you'll see a link there as well. Hey, listen, last week, Pierce Young and I, he's the Assistant Coordinator of Private Lands for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. We had a terrific conversation about feeder, or just really in general about what's going on in his world. We started a conversation about feeders, and we didn't get a chance to finish it. So I invited Pierce to join me again today so we can sort of pick it up from there, because he's been out for years working with hundreds of different landowners, and he's developed a lot of important data on what ultimately leads to the kind of recommendations he wants to make to private landowners about the use of feeders. And I want to continue that conversation so you get a chance to hear somebody who's been out in the field for years, talking to people. And, we've got so much information we're getting from Mississippi Deer Lab and from our own work out in the field. Pierce is in a great position to talk to us about that. But anyway, without any further ado, let me welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors, Pierce Young. How you doing, Pierce?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Hey, by the way, happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
I saw that when I went to get your information from the Facebook page. So happy birthday to you, my friend. So you're out in the field now. Where are you right now?
Yeah, right now I'm somewhere in between Rankin County and Simpson County, going to pick up CWD samples from freezers and taxidermists from the velvet season.
Well, good. What's the early report on velvet season? Did we get a lot of samples?
We did. Looks like the numbers will be the highest we've had compared to the last two seasons. So this is our third year. This will probably be our highest sample submission. Good.
I look forward to having William McKinley, head of the deer program, on to talk about the velvet season and also really just talk about what's the latest in his white-tailed deer world. He's a regular guest and someone we're lucky to have William in this state, aren't we, my friend?
Absolutely. Wealth of knowledge. You know, he's going on over 25 years with the department. I mean, you can't beat the knowledge that he's gained and gains more every year.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I was on Mississippi Whitetails the other day, and somebody posted something about it's best not to use feeders, not related to anything that you posted, just somebody else posted it. And it was a really, really good post. I was reading the comments, though, and man, reading the comments tells me that we have a lot of work to do in this state to educate people. They don't truly understand or appreciate the threat that chronic wasting disease poses to our state. So we got some educating to do, don't we?
You know, we do, and that whenever you have an important topic, I mean, education is key. But you know, one thing that I've seen just in the last probably 5 to 10 years is I believe there's more of a shift in knowledge on feeding. You know, feeding has gotten a lot more prevalent in our state. I mean, some estimates by Mississippi State University Deer Lab has shown that it's probably doubled since 2017. We've gotten a lot of, excuse me, a lot of new information since then. But a new estimate that they're looking at as of last season was showing there's probably a minimum of 1 feeder per 14 deer and 1 feeder per 2 turkeys. I mean, that's a lot of feeders, and a lot of wildlife accessing, feeders. So, from a wildlife biologist standpoint and a private lands consultant, I'm looking at why is it important to look at this topic, from a biology standpoint, how does it affect the animals, but also, working with landowners, how does it affect, the hunters and the landowners trying to manage for them, and it's an important thing, and weighing the pros and cons, to both is very important.
Hey, one of the things that I noticed too, not only in the comments for the Mississippi Whitetails post that I was mentioning, but also in the post that you've been doing, is there are a lot more people seeming to weigh in now, saying they'd rather not use feeders. I mean, that is a good trend to see, isn't it?
It is, and I've been seeing that in the field, really the last 5 years, as a lot of this new information has come out, especially in regards to the risk to wild turkeys and things like that. I've seen more of a shift of people's willingness not to do it with this new information, as well as just the potential risk, and really the number one reason I've heard, on Facebook or in the field with landowners, is the main reason people feed is because they're competing with their neighbors, and that's not a very good reason,
So what do you say to someone who uses, and we've, in some of the farms that I lease, we've had very aggressive neighbors that have done feeding, and we've used feeders in those areas. We don't use them on all food plots, and as I mentioned, I've never shot a deer over a feeder. I've had all my luck away from feeders, and all your science proves that I should have more luck. We should have more luck away from feeders. But what do you say to people who are saying we're just trying to compete with our neighbors on the property lines?
Man, that's probably the toughest conversation to have, because I can weigh pros and cons, for multiple things, as far as cost or disease risk. But when it comes to competing with your neighbors, especially with corn feeding, I mean, deer are going to go to corn like candy. You know what I mean? And so they're going to use it. Now, when they're using it, may not be beneficial to the hunters, and are those risks still there? Absolutely. Is it worse with a lot more people doing it? Absolutely. The number one thing I try to get people to do is talk to their neighbors. I have a lot of land cooperatives now that have kind of all agreed. The biggest property may be 200 acres, but in cooperation, there's 8,000 acres together agreeing not to feed, so it doesn't affect one another, and just talking with them, from that aspect, and going from there, because that is the hardest conversation to have for sure.
Hey, listen, when I talk to anyone from the Wild Turkey Federation, or people like Will Primos and Lake Pickle and many others, and we get into the turkey part of the conversation as it relates to feeding deer, that's when it really you start to really understand we've got a real challenge here, and we better address it, because if we don't, it's going to affect our ability to manage turkey in the way we want to in the future, isn't it?
Absolutely. With deer, that list is a lot shorter. Especially if you're in a CWD zone, it's a lot more important. But any disease risk is heightened when you get a lot of animals together, a lot of different animals together that don't naturally congregate. When you have wild hogs, deer, turkeys, raccoons all coming to the same spot, that's not natural, and there's some negatives to that. Part of that is, with turkeys, I mean, they've shown aflatoxins. I know that's a big topic that a lot of people are familiar with the research the last few years, the risk to turkeys, to wild turkeys. I know our turkey coordinator, Adam Butler, he has gotten calls, gone and picked up adult turkeys that were found dead on the landscape, took it to the lab, and the diagnosis the diagnostic results came back as aflatoxin poisoning, but also parasites. There's a parasite that's really bad for turkeys called coccidia. MSU Deer Lab did a really good research project on that, showing that concentrations at feeders were 5 times or 500% higher at these feeders. And those are parasites that are being dropped in the feces, from raccoons and deer. Even in deer feces, this parasite's getting concentrated unnaturally. And then the turkeys are picking around, at that place. And then also predators, it's just, we've seen it. There's been a few studies on it showing that predator movements will concentrate, around these areas as well.
Well, there's no doubt about that. We know that to be a fact for sure. Listen, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Pierce Young, the Assistant Coordinator of Private Lands for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and we'll continue our conversation about the use of feeders. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors from the Open Season Properties Studio. Appreciate you joining us. Listen, no matter what kind of hunting you're into, whether you're looking for 40 acres or 4,000 acres, if you're looking to buy land, you need someone you can trust. He's a hunting land hunter. Call Lake Pickle of Open Season Properties at 601-750-2487, 601-750-2487. We're thrilled to have Lake as a regular guest on this show. He's just terrific. We're visiting this morning, kind of finishing up a conversation we had started last week with Pierce Young. He's Assistant Coordinator of Private Lands for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. But, hey, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and then we'll make sure we say the rest that we need to say as it relates to feeders. When the Mississippi Deer Lab did the aerial survey of feeders across the state of Mississippi, did they also find feeders still being used in CWD zones where they're not supposed to be used?
Yeah, they were. Corn piles were only about 7%, but actual feeders, still being on the landscape, were still out there. It was reduced compared to everywhere else in the state, but by about 40%. 40% reduction within the CWD zones compared to outside the CWD zones.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a show here in the near future where I'm going to invite somebody from Benton County to join me to talk about their experience with CWD, so we can really understand. I hate to call it a best practice, because if there is a CWD story to tell, experience to tell in Mississippi, this the prevalence that we're experiencing in Benton County. Okay, coming back over to deer feeders, though, it's got to be, with all the private land consulting you do, it's got to be just a hot topic.
It really is, and to add, to some of the recent work that MSU Deer Lab's also been doing, they're showing that, deer are unnaturally concentrating at about 5 times higher rates at feeder locations compared to, say, natural or food plots or like acorn trees and things like that. Groups, does get in family groups. Typically, they don't interact a lot, except they're seeing them interacting at feeders. So, just like, any situation with any type of disease, whether it's deer or turkeys, the more you get them concentrated together, the worse those diseases will react in those populations, for sure.
It's hard to when I think about what the counterbalance to this is to focus on quality food plots, is to focus on summer plots. And I can't help but think about my friend Spike Crawford, who passed away unexpectedly recently. Gosh, he and I, over the last many years, have talked so much about what he's learned over many years about how to do it the right way, how to have the best food plots you can have, and how to attract deer and keep deer. And that's where the focus needs to be, on those things, not on artificial. We did well without feeders for a long time in Mississippi, didn't we?
For a long time. When I was growing up, we didn't have feeders, and we had great success. And if you look at the numbers, we've been running some of the statewide numbers recently, and the number of successful hunters is lower. So we've seen a little bit of an increase in hunters lately. Our population is probably the highest, statewide, especially in certain pockets, that it's ever been. But people are being less successful. I can't tie that, to corn feeding or anything. But looking at statewide body weights, with all this extra corn feeding, the main reason people were pushing it was, increased body weights, and increased antler size. And we haven't been seeing that in the statewide numbers. But as you were saying with food plots and habitat management, some great work has been done by like Marcus Lashley and them showing, as far as cost production, it's way more expensive to do supplemental feeding, whether it's corn or protein. You can get a lot more production out of food plots and prescribed fire. With prescribed fire, you can typically, for the same cost, get 30 times more protein on the landscape by doing prescribed fire habitat work, food plots, and stuff like that.
But what hunters are trying to do is, frankly, concentrate deer so they have a better chance of taking the deer. And and listen, I've had great conversations on this show about prescribed burns and how we're talking so much more about that now. And you think about the U.S. Forest Service here in Mississippi. I mean, they may be a best practice in the entire United States for what they're doing with controlled burns and how they're deploying that. I know you know that, but there's so much positive that can come from that, and we're not talking much about that. I mean, that one of the great things about what you do, this free service that the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks offers, is you bring those skill sets to private owners and give them the ability to have the advantage of all your learning so they can manage their property to be the best private land it possibly can be. And for that, we really appreciate it. But listen, we won't end the conversation here, Pierce. We'll just keep it going, and you'll be a regular guest on the show. And I really appreciate what you're doing, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Ricky.
You bet. This has been Pierce Young, Assistant Coordinator of Private Lands for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Go to the Foundation for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks website. Consider giving a contribution to the K9 unit. They would really appreciate it. And as I always say, stay safe when you're out in the outdoors. Always put safety first. God bless you, and we will see you next week.